a major decision from the Supreme Court.
Come out in their robes and they sit down and you look at them and not a clue from anyone. No one smiles, no one winks, no one grimaces.
It was a major civil rights battle of our generation.
I wasn't exactly sure what would happen.
There had been plans for when the case came down that we would either have a rally in celebration or there would be a protest.
Everything was riding on this case.
There were 13 states that still had sodomy laws on the books.
Most people in the United States at that point in 2003 would have been shocked to know that there was even a possibility that you could be arrested in your home for making the wrong choice about what form of sexual intimacy to engage in or with whom.
That was my home, it was my castle. No matter what was going on in there, that was my business. And the next thing I know, these two officers were in the house. Their version of the story was that they had found us engaging in sex. They did not search anything to find a gun. They just yelled, threw me back on the couch. It's just all of a sudden, we're taking you downtown.
You was inside of a private residence, you know, and someone walk in and just take you out.
We were not even treated like civilized citizens.
I think it was really rough on John.
I wasn't allowed to put clothes on. I was handcuffed and dragged down the stairs.
The arrest was so bizarre in its facts. It was just a story no one would really ignore.
The next afternoon, we were taken to a hearing where we were charged with 2106.
Texas had and still has a law on its books under its criminal statutes, which we call the Penal Code, under 21.06, called homosexual conduct.
It used to be a law that prohibited anal or oral sex between heterosexuals or homosexuals. It was rewritten in the 1970s to make a law that just applied to gay and lesbian people.
Sodomy laws had a life of their own far beyond the potential for criminal prosecution. We were, by definition, criminals.
That had been used in many different other cases to say that gay people shouldn't be parents.
We got right to the point where they were going to start talking about placing a child with us, and the social service agency we were working with came to us and said, we can't place children with criminals.
That gay people shouldn't be employed as police officers or teachers.
To lose a job when it was completely unrelated to my merits as a lawyer, simply because we were having a commitment ceremony, felt so wrong.
So it had lots of secondary effects.
People were being arrested.
They would actually write down the license plates of people going to gay bars.
If someone wanted to discriminate against somebody because they're gay or lesbian, they had an avenue to do it.
You may think that the sodomy laws are just about men soliciting men in bathrooms and police picking them up. But truthfully, the sodomy law had to do with the fact that I couldn't adopt a little boy who needed a forever home.
So we saw the connection between the existence of sodomy laws and getting equal treatment.
It was a ridiculous law, but Texas loves to keep some antiquated things around.
Well, the Lawrence case came into our radar very shortly after John and Tyrone were arrested. This is work that Lambda Legal and other organizations had been doing for many, many years at this point. There had been a time when every state in the country had a sodomy law.
Cases were brought in Montana, Kentucky,
Tennessee, Arkansas, Georgia.
And Lambda Legal was involved in those cases.
We were forced to do it state by state using state constitutions, and we were quite successful in picking off states one at a time.
I was pissed. They picked the wrong person to pull this on. And I says, I am going to court.
Lambda Legal very carefully explained to Lawrence and Garner before they represented them that they had a larger goal for this. And the larger goal was to not only eliminate the Texas sodomy law, but eradicate all of the 13 sodomy laws that were now enforceable and on the books in the states in 2003.
Our clients pled no contest from the beginning, basically, which means that we're not challenging the facts, we're just challenging the law.
The highest court in Texas said, we think these laws are just fine, and we think this conviction is just fine. It was perfectly okay to convict 2 adult men for having sex with each other.
The day that we found out that the Texas Supreme Court had not taken jurisdiction and that the next step was U.S. Supreme Court, Washington, D.C., I remember having enormous butterflies in my stomach.
There was a lot of talk about whether or not it was risky to take the Lawrence case to the Supreme Court in 2003.
We had doubters that said, you shouldn't be litigating this case, you're going to lose, you're going to make things even worse for us.
Bowers v. Hardwick was a pretty devastating loss.
The U.S. Supreme Court upheld consensual sodomy law in Georgia, and implicitly, therefore, in the other 23 or 24 states that had them in 1986.
It was like a huge collective kick in the gut for the LGBT community to be told by the U.S. Supreme Court that we had no protection under the U.S. Constitution, that states could do what they wanted.
States would very often cite Bowers as a justification for anti-gay and lesbian discrimination.
And that's why reversing Bowers versus Hardwick was really at the top of our agenda.
The stakes were very high because, keep in mind, we were very lucky to get back before the court 17 years later. If we didn't win this time, we weren't going to get back in the next 5 years or 10 years or 15 years after that either.
Knowing Lawrence was coming up and that we were here, I was just determined to go hear the oral argument for it.
There were a lot of law students there who were waiting in line, and a lot of gay and lesbian people in line.
Virtually every important person in the gay rights movement who had been working very hard for that day for many years was there that day.
During the arguments, there were demonstrators outside the court on the other side blaming the gay community for everything from AIDS to September 11th attacks to the Columbia shuttle.
I felt like it was historic.
It was this unique situation where the courtroom was filled with people who had so much at stake in this case.
We are going to be present here, and we are going to look you justices in the eye. And if you end up saying that we are criminals, you have to see the human beings.
But on the other hand, if you're arguing and you've got this huge crowd of people all looking behind you, there's also some sense of pressure that you have to be their spokesperson.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court. Petitioners are two adults who were arrested in a private home and criminally convicted simply because they engaged in one of the forms of sexual intimacy that is on the banned list in the state of Texas for same-sex couples.
What we wanted the court to be thinking about, not just sexual activity, but families.
It has to be apparent to the court now that there are gay families, and that for those people, the opportunity to engage in sexual expression as they will in the privacy of their own homes performs much the same function that it does in the marital context, that you can't protect one without the other, that it doesn't make sense to draw a line there, and that you should protect it for everyone.
People were pretty riveted watching Paul Smith argue this case.
The case is submitted.
The Honorable Court is now adjourned.
And we were waiting for the decision because we kept thinking it was going to come out. And every morning, I would go on the computer and try to look to see if it had come out.
Even though I had been very confident since the beginning of the litigation that we would win this case at the Supreme Court, I started to have more fears and doubts while they were just sitting there on the case until the last day came.
It was the last day of the term. They must be deciding the case today, so we all went and watched.
It was going to be a big deal. I didn't think there would be some sort of medium decision in this case. It would have a lot of implications for other cases.
They come out in their robes and they sit down and you look at them and not a clue from anyone. Incredible poker faces. Kennedy starts his first sentence and I think, oh, this could be good.
This case should be resolved by determining whether the petitioners were free as adults to engage in this private conduct.
He gets to his second or third sentence and I go, no, this is good.
The petitioners are entitled to respect for their private lives.
And then he says a few more things and I think, this is really good.
The state cannot demean their existence or control their destiny by making their private sexual conduct a crime.
Oh my God.
The U.S. Supreme Court today struck down a Texas law prohibiting gay men from engaging in sexual relations in their own homes.
We had gotten a home run. We'd actually won 6-3.
I called John and Tyrone, and John was watching the news.
So I am laying in bed trying to go back and get my 40 winks, and all of a sudden it says, has ruled the law unconstitutional. I came out of bed quite happy.
It was on every news station, it was on the radio, it was everywhere.
John Lawrence and Tyrone Garner became reluctant legal pioneers.
You can walk anywhere without hearing about the victory that took place in the Supreme Court.
It was a day when I felt, more than almost any day in my life, pride.
We celebrated seemed like for weeks.
The ruling's impact, well, it goes way beyond Texas.
When Lawrence versus Texas was decided, there were 13 states that still had it a crime to have consensual sex between two consenting adults. Those laws are gone.
Gay people were openly brought into the protections of the United States Constitution.
I think all of us who are out and living our lives with integrity are part of that victory.
This lady walked up to me and kissed me on the cheek, and she says, "Thank you. Thank you."
I asked John Lawrence and Tyrone, You know, people are comparing you to Rosa Parks, and they're comparing you to Jane Roe of abortion. You know, do you think of yourselves like that? And they just laughed so hard.
He was brave. He was pretty brave.
And a hero in, I feel, the best sense of the word, because he was an everyday hero. He was an inspiration.
I studied the Brown versus Board of Education decision, and it was a really seminal decision for African Americans. And I really feel like Lawrence is our Brown, that it's the kind of decision that really sets up a marker for us.
It really changed the world for gay and lesbian people.
And the decision is so beautiful. It's so sweeping and inspiring.
Bowers was not correct when it was decided, and it is not correct today. It ought not to remain binding precedent. Bowers v. Hardwick should be and is now overruled. And I mean, I tear up now when I read that. I can't tell you at the court. That was a mess.
The day of Lawrence, a family member called me to congratulate me and said, "Does this mean you're out of a job?"
We didn't know how sweeping the victory would be. And it was broader, I think, than we'd anticipated, with great language for future cases as well.
It made people feel like they could stand up and fight and might win.
We are proud to say we were married on May 17th, 2004, and we were one of the first couples to marry in the state of Massachusetts.
The whole premise of Lawrence is that lesbian and gay same-sex relationships are actually family relationships.
It's a basic liberty to have a family. You have a right to choose what kind of family you're going to have. You have a right to choose who you're going to be intimate with.
We wouldn't be where we are today had Lawrence not happened.
What the Lawrence case should be setting the stage for is a future where the principles in Lawrence are expanded.
So we wouldn't be able to have the debates we're having today about youth and schools, about marriage and relationship recognition, about second parent adoption, if we were still fighting sodomy laws, if we were still living under the shadow of sodomy laws.
I've been waiting 24 years to say, Dorina Wong, would you please marry me?